The words came like a slap across my face. My father's voice boomed through the dining room, shaking the very walls of the house I had helped pay for. "You don't deserve Grandma's inheritance." The air turned heavy, the smell of roasted chicken now sickening in my throat. I froze, my fork slipping from my hand as my mother's sneer followed close behind. She leaned forward, her eyes sharp with contempt. "He's right. You've always been ungrateful, Colleen. Always the lesser child. Claire is the one Grandma truly wanted to carry the family's name, not you." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The very people who had raised me, who had watched me bleed myself dry to keep this household running, were cutting me down as if I was nothing. My gaze flickered to the chair across from me, where Evan, my 10-year-old son, sat frozen. His fork hovered in midair, his wide eyes darting between us, searching for an answer I could not give. I forced myself to speak, my voice trembling. "This is my home. I've poured every dollar into this place. I've kept the lights on, the food on this table." My father slammed his fist so hard the plates rattled. "Don't twist this. You've been carried your whole life, Colleen. A few bills don't make you entitled to $31 million. My chest tightened, anger boiling, but my mother only twisted the knife deeper. "Claire deserves it all. She's the success, the one Grandma was proud of. You've always been a shadow." And then Claire appeared, as if she'd been waiting for her grand entrance. She strolled into the room with her arms crossed and a smirk plastered across her face. Finally, the truth comes out. "Grandma trusted me, not you. You've been bitter for years, but now it's official." Her words knocked the breath from me. My knees wobbled beneath the table. "What are you saying?" I whispered. Though my heart already knew the answer, my father didn't flinch. "We signed the papers. This house belongs to Claire now. You and that boy of yours have 48 hours to leave." The floor seemed to collapse beneath me. 48 hours? The very home where I had raised my son, the place where I had sacrificed everything, was no longer mine. My mother's lip curled, her expression almost gleeful at my collapse. "You heard him. Pack your things. You don't belong here anymore." Evan's small voice cut through the silence. "Mom, are we leaving?" His eyes brimmed with confusion, his little hands gripping the edge of the table as if to anchor himself. My throat burned, but I forced a smile for him. "Go to your room, sweetheart." "I'll come in a minute." He hesitated, then disappeared down the hallway, the sound of his footsteps fading like a final goodbye. I stayed rooted in place, my pulse pounding in my ears. Every sacrifice, every late shift, every bill I had covered, every meal I had skipped so there would be food on this very table, had been erased in one cruel sentence. Claire's laugh rang out like a victory bell. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be, Colleen. Accept it." Grandma wanted me to have it, not you. I stared at her, my vision blurring with hot tears I refused to let fall. They wanted me broken. They wanted me gone. But deep inside, something stirred, a spark I hadn't felt in years. I turned away without another word, my hands shaking as I gripped the back of my chair. The weight of betrayal pressed down on me, yet beneath the grief, something darker, sharper began to take root. 48 hours. That was all I had left in the house I thought was mine. But as I walked toward my room, one truth echoed louder than their cruelty. This was not the first time they had tried to make me disposable. And this time, it just might be their last. When I think back to my childhood, the only place that truly felt like home wasn't the house I grew up in. It was Grandma's kitchen. The scent of apple pies and cinnamon rolls would drift through the air long before I even stepped inside. She always had flour on her hands, yet somehow, her hugs never failed to feel warm and clean. "Colleen," she would whisper, pressing a kiss to my forehead, "you'll always have something of mine one day." I never understood what she meant as a little girl, but the way her voice carried both love and certainty made me believe I wasn't invisible. In her presence, I wasn't the forgotten middle child. I mattered. At home, things couldn't have been more different. Michael, my older brother, was the golden boy. Every test score, every soccer goal, every half-hearted achievement was met with applause. Claire, my younger sister, was the darling, the baby everyone wanted to protect. And me, I was the space between them. Quiet, ordinary, the one whose name was often left off the roll call of praise. I remember one particular Sunday dinner. The table was loud with laughter, the clink of silverware, the endless chatter about Michael's new internship. Dad raised his glass, pride swelling in his voice as he toasted to his son. Then he turned to Claire. praising her art project that had won at school, everyone leaning in to admire her drawing as if it belonged in a gallery. I cleared my throat softly, holding up a paper I'd written. "I got an A+ on my essay," I said, my cheeks warm with anticipation. For a brief moment, the table grew silent. Then Dad waved a dismissive hand. "That's nice, Colleen, but anyone can write an essay." The laughter picked up again, flowing right past me, drowning my small attempt at recognition. I learned to stop speaking up. The more I tried, the less I seemed to matter. But Grandma always noticed. She'd slip me cookies wrapped in napkins when no one was looking, whispering, "Don't let their noise drown your light." I held onto her words like lifelines. As I grew older, the favoritism became impossible to ignore. Every birthday party, every holiday, it was Michael and Claire at the center, while I hovered at the edges. Even extended family joined the chorus. Aunt Margaret, sharp as a needle, once leaned across the table and muttered, "Colleen's just ordinary. She'll never shine like the others." Everyone laughed. I smiled through the sting, but inside, I felt myself folding smaller and smaller, and yet, Grandma never let me fade. She'd pull me close, brushing my hair back as if I were made of something precious. "You'll have something of mine," she'd say again, softer this time, like a secret promise only I was meant to keep. One night, when I was barely 12, I crept downstairs for a glass of water. My parents were in the living room, voices low but clear enough to catch. My mother's tone carried certainty, like it was already written in stone. "Claire will always be the one Grandma leaves everything to." The glass trembled in my hands. I held my breath, afraid even the smallest sound would give me away. At that moment, the truth sank in. I wasn't just overlooked, I was erased. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and sadness, a sharp sting in the air that clung to my clothes long after I left. Grandma lay in the bed, her skin pale but her eyes still carrying that same warmth I'd known all my life. I pulled a chair beside her, gently wrapping my fingers around her frail hand. "Colleen," she whispered, her voice raspy but strong enough to cut through the hum of machines. "Promise me something." I leaned closer, tears already pooling in my eyes. "Anything, Grandma." Her eyes flickered with a kind of urgency I'd never seen before. "Promise me you'll never let them take away what I've left for you." Her words landed heavy, like a secret burden passing from her heart to mine. I nodded quickly, squeezing her hand tighter. "I promise." For the next hour, I sat with her, listening as she drifted in and out of sleep, her breath shallow but steady. I told her stories about school, about Evan, about anything I could think of just to keep her present, to keep her with me a little longer. But days later, she was gone. The news shattered me. I stood at the foot of her bed when the nurse pulled the sheet over her face, my chest aching so badly I thought it might break. Losing her was more than losing a grandmother. It was losing the one person who had always seen me. In the days that followed, the house filled with relatives. The whispers started almost immediately. I caught my parents in the kitchen more than once, their voices sharp and hushed, glancing toward me like I wasn't supposed to notice. Words like will and inheritance floated between them, but grief wrapped me so tightly that I brushed it off. I didn't want to think about money or property. I just wanted her back. The funeral came fast. I stood in the front row, numb, clutching the folded tissue in my hand until it shredded into pieces. Michael and Claire stood flanking my parents, perfect as always, each of them drawing sympathy from every guest who walked by. People offered their condolences, but their eyes lingered on Claire, as if she were the true heir to Grandma's legacy. I caught my parents exchanging glances with her, small, loaded looks that twisted my stomach. They didn't mourn the same way I did. Their grief wasn't raw or desperate. It was calculating. As the casket was lowered into the ground, I felt like I was standing outside of my own family. Their circle was tight, impenetrable, and I was left on the fringe, clutching Grandma's last words like a shield. "Don't let them take away what I've left for you." I whispered it under my breath as the dirt fell onto her coffin. It was the only thing keeping me from collapsing. What I didn't know then was just how far they'd go to make sure those words would be tested. The air in the lawyer's office was thick with tension, as if even the walls knew the weight of what was about to be revealed. We all sat around the long, polished table, the blinds half drawn against the afternoon sun. My parents sat together, stiff-backed, their hands clenched. Michael slouched with false confidence, and Claire twirled her hair, smirking like she already knew the outcome. I kept my hands folded in my lap, steadying my breath. The lawyer cleared his throat, unfolding a thick envelope with deliberate care. As executor of your grandmother's estate, it's my duty to read her final will. His voice was calm, steady, almost clinical, but every word felt like a drumbeat in my chest. He began with the formalities, naming relatives, small bequests of jewelry, and personal items to cousins and extended family. I listened, numb, until the lawyer's tone shifted. The bulk of the estate, totaling $31.5 million, has been designated for her grandchildren. The room shifted instantly. My father stiffened. My mother's lips thinned to a razor edge. Michael straightened in his chair, expectant. Claire's smirk grew wider, as if the crown was about to be placed on her head. Then the lawyer continued. Of that amount, the largest share has been left to Colleen Harper. For a moment, there was silence. A silence so sharp it felt like the air had been cut in two. My mother blinked rapidly, her mouth parting in disbelief. My father's face turned red, veins straining in his neck. Michael dropped back into his chair, his jaw slack. And Claire's hand froze mid-twirl, her cheeks flushing crimson before she pushed back her chair so hard it screeched against the floor. This is ridiculous, she snapped, rising to her feet. Everyone knows Grandma favored me. She told me I was her favorite. The lawyer didn't flinch. Your grandmother was very clear in her wording. She wrote, Colleen has carried burdens unseen by others. She deserves to be secure, and I want her to have the resources I was never able to give her while alive. The words struck me like a lightning bolt. My throat tightened, tears stinging my eyes. For years, Grandma had been my safe place, my secret encouragement. And now, even in death, she was still protecting me. But the shock wasn't over. The lawyer shuffled another page and read, in addition, the Harper family home is to remain in Colleen's name. She is the sole heir of the property. The air shifted again, this time heavier. My parents' faces twisted with rage, their pride unraveling in front of everyone. Michael muttered under his breath, That's not possible. But no one listened. Claire's face crumpled. She stormed out of the room, her heels clicking furiously down the hall, leaving the echo of her humiliation behind her. I sat frozen, torn between pride and dread. $31.5 million. The house. It felt surreal, like words from another world. A part of me wanted to smile, to breathe in the justice of it all. But another part knew my parents would never, ever accept this quietly. As the meeting wrapped up, I stood, still trembling, and turned to leave. That's when my mother leaned in, her voice low, sharp as venom. We'll see about that. Her words crawled into my bones. I knew then the fight had only just begun. The days that followed were suffocating. At first there was silence. No shouting, no arguments, just a brittle, heavy quiet that clung to the house like fog. But it didn't last. The whispers began at breakfast, the half-smiles over dinner, the carefully chosen words designed to bend me without breaking me. You know, my mother said one morning, her voice syrupy sweet as she poured herself coffee. Your grandmother always believed in family unity. It would be selfish to keep everything for yourself. Don't you think Michael and Claire deserve a share? I set my mug down carefully. Grandma was clear. She left it to me. That was her choice. My father chuckled bitterly from across the table. You sound proud of that, like hoarding money is some kind of virtue. A real daughter would share. I forced a calm tone. A real daughter would honor her grandmother's wishes. Their smiles vanished. My mother's eyes hardened. Michael avoided my gaze, his lips pressed into a thin line. Claire barely looked at me at all, her humiliation from the lawyer's office still fresh, though I could feel her resentment pulsing like heat across the room. By the end of the week, the manipulation turned to outright demands. One night, Dad slammed his fist against the kitchen counter. You're selfish. After everything we've done for you, you'd really keep all of it? You think you deserve this inheritance more than your brother and sister? I felt my pulse hammering in my ears, but I stood my ground. I don't think it. Grandma thought it. She made it clear. His face twisted with rage. Ungrateful brat. We raised you, fed you, gave you a roof, and this is how you repay us? The words stung, but I didn't flinch. I've been repaying you my whole life. Paying bills, covering rent, keeping this house running while you praised Michael and Claire for doing nothing. Grandma saw it. Even if you refused to. The silence that followed was jagged, dangerous. My child's small footsteps padded down the hall, and I felt my heart sink. I didn't want him to see this, to hear the poison spilling out of the people who should have been his family. I guided him gently back to his room and returned to the kitchen, my decision already made. That night, when the shouting finally died down, I sat at my desk with a stack of papers. Receipts, bank statements, copies of payments I'd made for utilities, repairs, groceries. Page after page of proof. I opened my notebook and began writing. Every insult, every demand, every time they called me selfish or ungrateful, I logged it all. My arsenal was forming, one line at a time, because I knew deep down this wasn't just about money. It was about truth. And one day, I would need proof strong enough to silence their lies forever. The dining room glowed with the golden light of candles and the murmur of voices. Platters of roasted chicken, steaming vegetables, and bread rolls covered the long oak table. Relatives filled every chair, laughter bouncing off the walls. For a moment, it almost felt like family, until Claire stood, her wine glass catching the light. Her voice rang sharp over the chatter. I think everyone here deserves to know the truth. The room hushed instantly. Forks froze halfway to their mouths. My heart dropped, already bracing for the blow. Claire's smirk widened as she turned toward me. Colleen stole Grandma's inheritance. $31.5 million, and she's keeping it all for herself. Does that sound fair to any of you? Gasps rippled across the table. An aunt covered her mouth. A cousin leaned forward, whispering to another. My uncle cleared his throat uncomfortably, his eyes darting between me and Claire. She doesn't deserve a dime, Claire continued, her voice dripping with venom. Grandma loved me. She wanted me to have everything. Colleen twisted it. She manipulated the will. My chest tightened as heat climbed my neck. Words formed at the back of my throat, desperate to escape, but I swallowed them down. If I defended myself, it would only fuel her fire. Instead, I stared at my plate, tracing the edge of my fork as if the cool silver could anchor me in the storm. The silence was unbearable. Relatives shifted in their chairs, torn between sympathy and suspicion. My mother finally spoke, her voice cold. Claire's right. Everyone knows Colleen has always been the selfish one. The laughter returned, but now it was cruel. Thin, sharp chuckles that stung like knives. Michael leaned back in his chair, smirking. She probably tricked Grandma in her last days. Poor old woman didn't know better. I felt the humiliation sink deep into my bones. At my own table, surrounded by family, I had been reduced to nothing more than a thief in their eyes. My son's wide, innocent gaze peeked at me from across the room. He didn't understand the words, but he felt the weight of them. I forced myself to smile at him, a fragile mask that cracked the moment he looked away. Inside, my chest burned. I wanted to scream, to shout the truth, to throw the will in their faces. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I excused myself quietly, ignoring the murmurs, the pitying stares, the snickers that followed me down the hall. In my room, I pulled out my journal, flipping to a blank page. My pen trembled in my hand, but my words were steady. Claire announced to everyone that I stole Grandma's money. Parents agreed. Michael mocked me. Entire family watched, line after line. I recorded every insult, every twisted accusation. Every time they painted me as the villain, I pressed the pen so hard the paper nearly tore. They thought they had broken me. But one day, I promised myself these pages would break them instead. After that dinner, the house was no longer a home. The air turned icy, not with silence, but with open contempt. My parents stopped speaking to me unless it was to hurl an insult. My mother stopped cooking meals for me and my son, her cold excuse ringing in my ears. You can feed yourself with all that money you stole. Dishes piled in the sink, but no one cleaned them. Laundry sat untouched. Chores that had once been shared became weapons, withheld to punish me. Michael and Claire sneered when I walked past. My father made a point to insult me loudly, ensuring my son could hear. Ungrateful, worthless, doesn't deserve anything she's been given. Each word chipped away at me, but I swallowed the pain. I worked longer hours, extra shifts at the office, and late-night freelance tasks on my laptop, anything to keep the bills paid. Every dollar stretched thin, but somehow I managed to keep the lights on. One evening, I returned home exhausted, grocery bags cutting into my hands. My son sat at the kitchen table coloring quietly. His little voice pierced the silence. "Mom, why does Grandma's house feel so sad now?" The question hit harder than any insult. I froze, blinking back the tears that threatened to spill. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" I asked softly. He shrugged, his eyes still fixed on his drawing. "It used to feel Warm, like Grandma. Now it feels cold, like it doesn't want us here. My throat tightened. Out of the mouths of children comes the truth adults pretend not to see. He wasn't wrong. The house that once carried the smell of pies and laughter now reeked of bitterness and resentment. I forced a smile, brushing his hair back gently. It's not the house, love. It's just people being unkind. But remember, this place is ours. Don't ever forget that. That night, when he was asleep, I sat at the kitchen table surrounded by receipts and statements. My notebook lay open, its pages filling with evidence of every slight, every cruelty. I had become invisible to my family, but not to myself. The next morning, as the mail slid through the slot, I sorted through the usual bills until one envelope made my heart stop. Heavy, stamped with the bank's seal, addressed not to my parents, but to me. Hands trembling, I tore it open. The words inside were clear. Property deed registered in the name of Colleen Harper. For a long moment, I just stared, the paper trembling in my grip. Proof. Legal proof. The house was mine. No amount of lies or manipulation could erase that truth. I folded the letter carefully, tucking it into my journal. My parents could sneer, my siblings could shout, but the day was coming when they would no longer be able to deny what was written in black and white. And when that day came, they would regret ever trying to make me feel small. It started with a notification on my phone. A friend from work sent me a screenshot with the message, "Is this true?" My stomach sank before I even opened it. Claire's face filled the screen, her perfect smile weaponized into venom. Her caption screamed in bold letters, "My so-called sister Colleen stole Grandma's inheritance. She's a greedy parasite living off money that was never hers." Shameful. The comments flooded beneath it. Hundreds of them. Voices from people I'd grown up with. Neighbors, even distant relatives. Always knew she was selfish. Poor Claire, she deserved it all. She should be ashamed of herself. My hands trembled as I scrolled, the words burning into my chest like fire. By the next day, the post had spread through the community. At the grocery store, whispers followed me down the aisles. Parents at my son's school stopped making small talk. Even the cashier avoided eye contact as she bagged my items. At home, my mother looked smug, as if Claire's stunt was some righteous crusade. "You brought this on yourself," she said coolly while folding laundry. "People can see who you really are now," I wanted to scream, to post my own truth, to upload the will for everyone to see. But I knew better. Fighting fire with fire would only feed their narrative. Instead, I picked up the phone and called Mr. Lawson, the lawyer who had handled Grandma's estate. His calm voice was a lifeline. "Colleen, listen to me. The will is airtight. There is no legal ground for Claire's claims. The inheritance is yours, the house is yours, and no amount of gossip changes that." I pressed the phone to my ear, tears threatening to fall. "But everyone thinks I stole it." He paused before replying. "Let them think what they want. The truth is written in ink. Gossip fades, but the law does not." For the first time in weeks, I exhaled. His words didn't erase the humiliation, but they gave me strength. Still, inside the house, the atmosphere grew frostier than ever. My father barely looked at me anymore, speaking only to bark orders. My mother muttered under her breath whenever I passed by. Claire visited more often, strutting around as though she already owned the place, her eyes glittering with smug anticipation. I started noticing closed doors and hushed conversations whenever I walked down the hall. Whispers cut off mid-sentence, glances exchanged like conspirators. My instincts screamed at me. They were planning something. One night, as I passed by the living room, I caught my father's voice sharp and cold. "She won't last much longer." "We'll find a way," my mother murmured back. "Claire deserves it." "We just have to push harder." I slipped away before they noticed me, heart pounding. My lawyer had reassured me, but I could feel the storm building. They weren't done trying to strip me of what was mine, and deep down, I knew their next move would be far crueler. It was late when I pulled into the driveway, weary from a double shift at work. The porch light was on, but something felt wrong. The curtains twitched, shadows moved inside. My chest tightened as I unlocked the door. The sight hit me like a punch. Boxes. My boxes. Piled in the hallway, my clothes stuffed in trash bags, my son's toys thrown carelessly into cardboard cartons. It looked like a moving truck had already been through. "What is this?" My voice cracked, my pulse racing. My father emerged from the living room, his face red with fury. "It's simple. Claire is the rightful owner now. We signed the house over to her. You don't belong here anymore. I staggered back, the words crashing down like thunder. Signed it over? That's impossible. The will— Forget the will, he barked. Claire deserves this house, not you. We've taken care of it. The papers are done. My mother stepped forward, arms crossed. Her eyes gleamed with cruel satisfaction. It's over, Colleen. Pack up and leave before we throw you out. For a split second, panic gripped me. Could they really have done it? Could they erase Grandma's wishes with a few signatures? My son clutched my leg, his small voice trembling. Mommy, what's happening? I steadied myself, pulling him close. It's okay, sweetheart. Go to your room for now. He nodded, wide-eyed, and disappeared down the hall. Turning back to my parents, I forced my voice to steady. Show me the papers. My father smirked and slapped a stack of documents onto the table. Right there. Proof. You're finished. I picked them up, my hands shaking, but as my eyes scanned the pages, my panic turned to cold, sharp fury. The signatures were clumsy imitations. The notary stamp was smeared, inconsistent. It was a forgery. You really thought I wouldn't notice? I whispered, my voice low but cutting. These are fake. For the first time, they faltered. My mother's smugness slipped, replaced by a flicker of doubt. My father's face twisted, but he didn't speak. I pulled out my phone, snapping photos of every page, every forged signature, every crooked stamp. Thank you, I said calmly. This is all the evidence I need. My father's voice roared through the hall. You think you're clever? You think anyone will believe you over your own family? I met his glare without flinching. I don't need them to believe me. The truth will. Silence filled the room, thick and suffocating. My parents stood rigid, their plan unraveling in their own hands. I gathered my son's toy box from the pile, holding it close as if it were armor. That night, after tucking him into bed, I sat at the kitchen table, the forged documents spread before me. My journal lay open, its pages now filled with not just insults and receipts, but proof of a crime. They hadn't just humiliated me, they had tried to erase me. And as I stared at those forged signatures, something inside me hardened. I wasn't going to defend myself anymore. I was going to fight back. The first night in the apartment was silent. Too silent. No shouting from my father, no sharp remarks from my mother, no staged whispers from Claire. Just me, my son, and the soft hum of a leaky radiator. The place was tiny. 2 rooms with peeling wallpaper and a stove that hissed like it was ready to explode. But it was ours. My son tugged at my sleeve as I laid down the last box. Mommy, is this really home now? His eyes were wide, searching, needing reassurance. I knelt, pulling him close. Yes, sweetheart. It's small, but it's ours. No one can take it from us. That night, after he fell asleep on the thin mattress, I sat at the kitchen table surrounded by receipts, forged papers, and my battered journal. I should have felt broken, but instead, a strange calm settled over me. The walls no longer echoed with insults. The air no longer stank of resentment. For the first time in years, I could breathe. The next morning, I met Denise. She was a woman in her late 40s who lived down the hall, her hair streaked with silver, her smile warm but knowing. She showed up at my door with a plate of muffins and a simple introduction. Welcome to the building. I'm Denise. It didn't take long for her to notice the stack of papers spread across my counter. That looks serious, she said gently, nodding toward the forged documents. It's family drama, I admitted, my voice cracking with exhaustion. My parents, they tried to sign my house over to my sister. It was fake, but they— Denise raised a hand. Stop, don't explain yet. Tell me, do you want to fight back? I hesitated only a second. Yes, more than anything. Her smile sharpened into something determined. Good, because you're not alone. I'm a financial advisor, and I've seen tricks like this before. If you're willing, I can help. Something inside me lit up. For months I'd been drowning, grasping for air, and now a hand reached out. Why? I whispered. Why help me? Her expression softened. Because I know what it feels like to be silenced. And because people like your family don't deserve to win. Over the next weeks, Denise became more than a neighbor. She became a guide, a rock. Together, we combed through every receipt, every bill I had ever paid for that house. She organized the papers into files, marking dates and signatures. She highlighted the inconsistencies in the forged documents and underlined my parents' reckless mistakes. At night, after my son went to bed, she'd sit at my table with a cup of tea, coaching me not just on finances, but on courage. This isn't about money, Colleen, she said once. It's about power. They stole your voice for years. Now it's time to take it back." Her words stayed with me. For the first time, I felt like the inheritance wasn't just Grandma's gift. It was a weapon she had left me, a shield against the people who had always belittled me. One evening, as I looked at the neatly stacked folders Denise had helped me create, I realized something profound. The apartment might be small, the walls might be cracked, but within them I was stronger than I had ever been under my parents' roof. I wasn't defeated. I was preparing. The plan took shape quietly, like a storm gathering far out at sea. Denise sat beside me in the lawyer's office, her presence grounding me as Mr. Lawson outlined the steps. "We'll file a case for fraud, harassment, and attempted theft of property," he explained, tapping the forged documents I'd collected. "With this evidence, the court will have no choice but to take you seriously." For the first time, I felt the scales tip in my favor. Denise leaned close, whispering, "This is where you reclaim everything they tried to strip from you." That night, I began reaching out to relatives. Some hung up the moment I mentioned my parents' names. Others offered half-hearted sympathy. But a few, just enough, were willing to speak. My cousin Lily, who had always been quietly observant, surprised me with her bluntness. "I've seen it all, Colleen. You paid bills, you carried that house. Everyone knows it, even if they pretend not to. I'll testify if you need me." Her words gave me strength. Piece by piece, I gathered testimonies like bricks for the foundation of my case. Each one chipped away at the lies my parents had built around Claire's rightful inheritance. But the other side wasn't idle. My parents struck back the only way they knew how, through the court of public opinion. Claire's social media posts grew nastier, painting me as a parasite, a liar, even a thief who brainwashed Grandma in her final days. Their allies in the neighborhood whispered louder, their stares sharper. At the diner where I worked part-time, I overheard customers murmur, "That's the one." The girl who stole her own family's money? The humiliation burned, but I refused to bow. Every cruel glance, every rumor became fuel. Back at the apartment, Denise noticed my slumped shoulders. "Don't you dare let them break you," she said firmly. "This is their tactic? Make you feel smaller until you give up." "But you're not giving up." "Not this time." I nodded, my throat tight. "I won't." As the weeks passed, the tension reached boiling point. My parents showed up outside my apartment once, shouting threats until the landlord called the police. Claire sent me a barrage of texts dripping with venom. "You'll regret this. Everyone is on our side. You're just wasting your time," I didn't reply. Instead, I saved every message, every voicemail, adding them to the growing mountain of evidence. One evening, Denise placed her hand over mine as I sorted the files. "You realize what's happening, right? For the first time, they're scared of you." I thought about that as I tucked my son into bed later that night. His small voice broke the silence. "Mommy, are we safe here?" I smoothed his hair back, my heart aching. "Yes, baby. Safer than we've ever been." But even as I said the words, I felt the weight of the coming battle. My family had tried to silence me for years. Now, with the law on my side and truth in my hands, I was about to roar louder than they ever expected. The storm wasn't coming anymore. It was here. The day of the trial arrived like a storm I'd been preparing for all my life. The courthouse smelled of old wood and polished floors, its walls echoing with hushed conversations and the shuffle of papers. My parents walked in first, flanking Claire as if she were royalty. Their heads were high, their expressions smug like they had already won. Claire's heels clicked sharply against the tile, each step radiating confidence. I sat quietly beside Denise and my lawyer, Mr. Lawson, my stomach tight but my face calm. My son had stayed home with a babysitter, and I silently thanked myself for sparing him from this circus. The judge entered, her robe sweeping as she took her seat. She glanced over the files stacked on her desk and began. "We're here to determine the rightful execution of Margaret Harper's estate and the disputes surrounding the inheritance." My father was the first to speak. His voice boomed with fake indignation. "Your Honor, my daughter Colleen has twisted facts, manipulated documents, and stolen what rightfully belongs to her sister. Grandma wanted Claire to have everything, not her." My mother chimed in, her tone syrupy yet sharp. "Colleen has always been selfish. This inheritance is too much for her. Claire is the one Grandma trusted." Their words cut deep, but I didn't flinch. Instead, I waited until Mr. Lawson stood. Calmly, he placed a folder before the judge. "Your Honor, the truth is simple. Here are the original deeds to the house, signed and notarized in Margaret Harper's name, leaving the property solely to Colleen." Gasps rippled through the room. My parents' faces paled. Next, Lawson lifted another stack. And here are bank statements and receipts showing Colleen, and Colleen alone, paid the mortgage, utilities, and upkeep for over a decade. These are her records, meticulously kept. Every cent is accounted for. He then called witnesses. Cousin Lily stepped forward, her voice steady. I was there when Grandma said it herself. She wanted Colleen to have security because she was the one who cared for her, the one who was always overlooked. Grandma told Colleen, "Don't let them take this from you." The courtroom grew still. Claire shifted uncomfortably, her mask of superiority cracking. Finally, Lawson closed with a line that pierced the silence. Your Honor, this is not a case of greed. This is a case of betrayal. And today is the day that betrayal ends. The judge studied the documents, her expression unreadable. Minutes stretched like hours until she finally spoke. Based on the evidence presented, the court rules in favor of Colleen Harper. The estate and property are legally and rightfully hers. The opposing claims are dismissed. The words landed like a hammer. My parents sat frozen, their confidence shattered. My father's mouth opened, but no sound came. My mother's eyes darted wildly, searching for a way out. Claire, her face red with humiliation, pushed her chair back so hard it screeched. She stormed out of the courtroom, tears streaking down her cheeks. I exhaled, the weight of years lifting all at once. I hadn't just won the case, I had reclaimed my dignity. News spread faster than I could have imagined. By the next morning, whispers rippled through the neighborhood, spilling into grocery aisles, coffee shops, and church pews. The Harpers, once the image of respectability, had been exposed. Relatives who once turned their backs now reached out, some with awkward apologies, others with embarrassed murmurs. We didn't know the whole story, they insisted. I smiled politely but didn't let their guilt sink into me. I wasn't looking for their validation. Neighbors, too, whispered differently now. The same people who had once believed Claire's social media lies now avoided meeting my parents' eyes. Their glances carried judgment, but not for me. For the first time, the golden child's shine had dulled, and the family who had always looked untouchable now seemed fragile, cracked. I didn't revel in their downfall. Vindication was sweet, yes, but arrogance wasn't what Grandma had raised me for. My victory was quieter, deeper. It was the knowledge that I was free. Free from manipulation. Free from their control. At night, I sat with my son at our small kitchen table in the apartment. He tugged at my sleeve, asking, "Mom, does this mean we can really keep Grandma's house?" "Yes," I said softly. "It's ours. No one can take it away now." His grin lit up the room. More valuable than the millions I had won? Still, I knew Grandma's gift wasn't meant for me alone. It was meant to build something better. So, I invested a portion of the inheritance into a college fund for my son. Watching the paperwork finalize, I felt a swell of pride. Grandma's legacy would live on in him, not as money, but as opportunity, safety, and freedom. I also reached out to Denise, who had stood by me when no one else did. Together, we set up a small charitable fund in Grandma's name, designed to help young women who had been overlooked or silenced by their families. Each application I reviewed reminded me of the girl I once was. Invisible at family dinners, dismissed, ignored. Now, I could make sure others didn't face the same fate. Meanwhile, my parents retreated into silence. They avoided me in public, their faces gray with shame. Claire deleted her social media accounts after her lies were exposed, her reputation shredded. For once, their voices no longer filled my world. Walking through the house Grandma had left me, I paused in the kitchen where she once baked pies, the smell of cinnamon lingering in my memory. I placed my hand on the counter and whispered, "I did it, Grandma. I honored you." The walls no longer felt haunted by betrayal. Instead, they carried strength. My strength. The true victory wasn't in the millions or the deed. It was in knowing I had broken the cycle of control. I stood alone, fought back, and won. And in the quiet of my home, as my son laughed in the next room, I realized I hadn't just inherited money. I had inherited freedom. The cemetery was quiet, a blanket of morning fog curling between the stones. I carried a small bouquet of lilies, Grandma's favorite, and walked slowly toward her grave. The weight of everything I had endured seemed to fall away with each step, leaving behind only clarity. Kneeling by her headstone, I brushed away a few fallen leaves. The stone was cool under my hand, her name carved into it with quiet dignity. For a long moment, I just stayed there, listening to the stillness, feeling the air heavy with memory. "Grandma," I whispered. my voice trembling. It's done. Justice has been done. The words carried more than victory. They carried release. I thought of the nights I had cried in silence, the mornings I had forced myself out of bed to keep going, the endless humiliations and betrayals. All of it had led here, to this moment where I could finally breathe without the weight of their voices pressing me down. I placed the flowers at the base of the stone, arranging them carefully as if she might step out at any moment to admire them. My chest tightened as I remembered her gentle laugh, the way she would knead dough with strong hands while telling me I was worth more than the world ever admitted. She had seen me, even when no one else did, and now her faith in me had been proven right. As I stood, my thoughts drifted to my parents and Claire. Their silence was deafening now. They no longer had the power to define me, no stage to perform their lies. The community that once applauded them now whispered about their disgrace. For years I had been the shadow child, overlooked, dismissed, belittled. But shadows can outlast the brightest flame. I turned away from the grave and began walking through the rows of stones, the morning sun breaking slowly through the fog. Each beam of light felt like a thread of peace stitching me back together. I realized then that family isn't always the people you're born to. Family is the ones who choose you, who stand beside you when the storm hits hardest. For me, that was my son and Denise, and even Grandma's memory that lived on in every step I took. Their loyalty mattered more than any bloodline. I thought about betrayal, how sharp and cruel it had felt. But strangely, I no longer hated it. Betrayal had shaped me, had forced me to grow steel in my spine and fire in my chest. Without it, I might never have discovered just how strong I could be. Pain had been my teacher, resilience, my inheritance. By the time I reached the cemetery gates, I felt lighter. The fight was over, but its lessons would stay with me forever. My son's laughter, echoing in my memory, was proof enough that the future I was building would not carry the poison of the past. I paused before leaving, glancing back one last time at Grandma's stone. "Thank you," I whispered, "for seeing me when no one else did, for believing in me. I promise I'll keep living in a way that makes you proud." The sun broke fully then, spilling gold across the grass. It felt like an answer. I walked away, not as the girl who once hid in her bedroom crying, but as the woman who had faced betrayal and turned it into strength. The world could no longer tell me I wasn't enough, because now I knew the truth. They once told me I didn't deserve anything. Today I am more than they'll ever be,